I'm doing this video series because there is a 19.1 version of Apex now. I have a complete video series for Oracle Apex 18.1, and the current series will use Apex 19.1 and will follow in parallel with the same steps in the 18.1 series. So I have for software this time XE 11.2, Apex 19.1, SQL Developer 19.1. I will not walk through the steps of installing XE and upgrading to Apex 19.1. You can look at the previous video series and this particular video, Apex 00 of 30, if you want a demonstration of how to install XE and upgrade Apex. The steps of going from Apex 18.1 to 19.1 are the same. So if you want to work along, you can download and install Oracle XE 11.2, or you can use the most current version, which I do not have installed. You can download Oracle Apex 19.1 and go through the steps of upgrading to that. The one other thing that I have is I have also installed a translated version of Apex for Spanish. So if you're interested in that, you can go to the documentation. It's pretty simple to follow and pretty easy to do. But it's not quite as simple as I've seen on a few posts online. It's not just a matter of selecting a different language. You do have to install a set of support files, images, and other things that will provide the translated version of Apex. Once you've done that, then when you log in and go to, in my case, the local install of Oracle Apex, I can pick between Spanish and English. So if I look at my version of the database, as I told you, if I run this, then I can see that I do have 11.2 installed. I can go to SQL Developer Help About and see that I'm working with version 19.1. So let's get started. The first thing that I want to do in this video is take a look at the data model using SQL Developer to import the data dictionary, which gives us a picture of the tables and how they're related in the database. There is a mistake or an inconsistency in the zip code table, and because of that, I need to make a correction to the list of values, the LOV, for zip code. So we'll take a look at that first. Then we're going to take a look at the second master detail that we created in the previous video. It comes with a report, and then you select a record from that report, and it opens up a main form subform view of person data and any related employee data if that person is also an employee. What we'll do is hide what we call the audit columns. Those are columns such as date created and date modified. Those are used to track activity on a particular record in the database. And those are populated using SQL code in a trigger. So we don't need to see those necessarily in the forms, and those fields are not input by somebody using the form. Then we'll also add LOVs for some of the other fields, and we will need to make a modification to the employee list in order to show only current or what we would call active employees. We can then copy that and use that to create a supervisor list where we would show employees that are not volunteers or veterinarians. Finally, we need to test the form. We've made several forms in the previous videos, but we need to test the forms ideally as we go to make sure that they are functional. So we'll do that. And in the process, we'll take a look at what's called the single row view in the subform. So I'm going to switch over to SQL Developer where I have already imported the data dictionary. I won't show those steps because we've done that in previous videos. So here I have the data model, and I'm going to zoom in and move over so that I'm looking at the zip code table. Notice we have a zip underscore ID field, and we have a zip field, which is designated as the primary key. Now, in most of my tables, I have an abbreviation for the table name followed with underscore ID, and that's designated as the primary key. At one point, I thought I was going to do that for zip, and then I changed my mind and thought I would use the actual zip code field as the primary key. So I'm not actually using zip underscore ID, and for the purposes of this tutorial, I only want zip as the primary key. In reality, in real life, this is probably not a valid design because the zip, depending on how many digits you store, might not be unique. But for our purposes, we're going to use zip, which is a 5-digit field, or they have a 5-digit code, and allowing up to 12 characters as the primary key. So I'm going to switch over and log into Apex as the developer. I'm going to go into Application Builder and go into the development application, and I'll go straight to Shared Components and to the list of values, and we've created many. I will go down to the zip list, and we see here that we have combined fields into a display for the zip code display. We have the zip code, the city, and the state. Then we return or store the zip underscore ID. However, that's actually an empty column. There's no data there because I'm not actually using it. What I want to do is change this from trying to store zip underscore ID to just the zip code itself. So take off the ID and the underscore and apply that change. And we'll see how that works. Let's come back to Application, and we'll run the application. Under People, we have this master detail. So I'm going to select that, and we start with a report. I'm going to filter on Sanchez because I know I have one Sanchez who's not an employee and one who is. I'm going to select Teresa, and I see on the top half I see the person data, and on the bottom half I see the related employee data. Now, one thing that's missing here that we added in the previous video is we added a pers status field. We have a status field for employee, but we added a field also in the person table. So let's put that into this main form. I will edit the page, and on the left-hand side, I will right-click on Items and add Page Item, and I get P20 underscore new. I'm going to change the name of that to Pers Status. That automatically comes down as the label. Then I need to scroll down and designate the source for this. So I'm going to pick type as database column and then type that in, and it's case sensitive, so it's going to be pers in caps underscore status. And then I will save that. And before I leave here, actually what I would like is to have the status up here to the right of the phone number. So we did this before in the previous video. Looking at phone number, we scroll down on the left or on the right hand side and see what the sequence is, whatever it is. And in this case it's 80, yours might be different, and the status is going to be 82. And that will force it up here right after phone number. So I can save that change, and I see status here. The other thing is, for the layout, I don't want a new row, and I'll save that. And while I'm here, before I go look at the form, highlight Date Created, hold down the Shift key, highlight Date Modified, and we're going to switch these to Hidden. These are not fields that the user will modify or input data to. So now those are hidden, and I will save and run that. I don't see any data, so I'll come back out and select Teresa again. And now we do not see the hidden columns for date created and date modified, but we do see the status field, which is something we added again in the last video to the table, and then now we added it to the form. So for Teresa, if I look at the subform, which is the employee data, out to the far left, I can select this stack of lines, and I can select single row view. And this is the data just in a different presentation. I can select edit, and right now what I see are just fields in which I would type in data. So I want to hide the date created and date modified, and I want to add LOVs for status, role, and supervisor ID. So I'm going to edit this page, and what we have on the left-hand side is we have the main form, which is persons, on the top. I'm going to collapse items, which allows me to see that I have employee. I'll go ahead and collapse person altogether, which is the main form, and I'll expand the columns for employees. Select date created, date modified, and switch those to hidden. When we created the form, we could have simply not included those in the form, but we took everything that was shown as is, so that's why I'm having to hide these now. I'm going to go to Purse ID. Actually, I'm going to do Imp ID and Purse ID. Those over here are hidden. That's what this line indicates, and I want to show them. So I'll make that display only. Those are also not populated by the person entering data, but I like to see those so we can make sure that the person ID in the main form matches the person ID in the subform. I like to see the primary and foreign key values in most cases. You can take those off later in the final application. So I'm going to select status, and I'm going to make this a select list, and that means I have to scroll down here to list of values, shared components, and that's status. It's employee status. So select employee status. I'll go to role. Again, I'll make that a select list. Scroll down, look at what we have in shared components, and this would be emp role. Then this is not going to be quite correct, but I'll go ahead and associate supervisor ID with a select list. So I'm going to do select list, scroll down, say look in shared components, and this will be the imp list. And I will save those, run that, come back out to the report, select Teresa, and when I come back in, I'm seeing the fields for person ID and for employee ID. I need to add columns. I need to add labels. Let me do that real quick. So for imp ID, the heading will be imp ID, and for purse ID, it'll be purse ID. And I can save that. When I run that, I come back and take a look at Teresa, and I'm seeing that information. If I come out to the left and do a single row view and switch to edit mode, then I can see that I have my list of values. So active has already been populated. Role, I'll just put her down as employee. And supervisor ID, right now I'm getting all employees. So I actually can select somebody who's inactive or a volunteer. So for example, I could select Randall Barnes. He's off the list here, but he's actually a volunteer, so he wouldn't be a supervisor. How do I know this? I can click on Page Designer tab, and then I can switch over, right click and go to Object Browser, take a look at my data, and I have persons, data, here's Randall Barnes at the bottom. He's 90009. I can go to employees and look for 9009, which is right here, and I see he's active, but he's a volunteer. So we need to fix that. So come back to Page Designer, and I want to right click and open up a tab for the application, and I'll go to Shared Components. So from all the lists of values, I want to pick the employee status. Oh, I don't mean employee status. I want to pick the employee list. And what I want to do is add a where clause. Now I'm looking at last name, first name, and then tacking on the pers ID for that person. And I'm joining it between the persons table and the employees table, which automatically filters out any persons that are not employees. But I need an additional condition here. So I need to add a where clause, and that would come after the on clause and before order. So I'll put where status is equal to active. And that will be case sensitive. So if the data shows capital A for active and everything else is lowercase, you need to match that. And that's what we see here in the object browser. So I can check that code, and then I can apply that change. Now this is still not going to be what I want for the supervisor list. So I'm going to copy an existing employee LOV, and this will be supervisor list, and make a copy. So now I see supervisor list. I'll select that, and I want to add additional conditions here. So it's where active is the status, and I could say where role does not equal volunteer or veterinarian, or I could just simply add and role is equal to employee. Let me look in Object Browser and see if I've got that right. No, it's EMP. I'm doing an abbreviation. So it'll be EMP instead of the full word. So now I can apply that change. I can come back to my form in Page Designer mode, and for the supervisor ID, I want to change my LOV, and I will switch that to the, oh, I need to do a refresh, I guess. I don't see that list, so let me do a refresh. I had that open while I made the changes in a different tab. So let me collapse the main form, which is persons, expand the columns under employee, select supervisor ID, and then scroll down and change the list to supervisor list, which is now showing. And save that and run that. Come back in for Teresa and go into edit mode. This time I'm not doing the single row view. And for the supervisor, notice you still get the drop down, so this is how it looks if you don't go to single row view. But when I look at my list of employees, I no longer see Randall Barnes, who was a volunteer. I no longer see Maggie Garcia, who is an inactive employee. So the last thing I want to do here is I want to add data. So I'm going to do a create, and I will add Felipe, no middle name, Para. His address is going to be 3165 North Elm, and the zip code So now I have the pop list and I want 88011. So I can do a search and that gives me the city and state as a display. Not being stored, the only thing being stored is 88011. And the status, I need an LOV for that, but I'll go ahead and just type in A because I know that's what we're storing for status. And I'll create that record, come back in. Oh wait, I want that for Felipe, so let me get rid of this filter and filter on Felipe, and here he is. So let's select Felipe, and I want to add a row, and I will make him active. His role will be employee, and he will have Doris Moore as his supervisor. And you can add a beginning date and apply changes. It pops us back out to the report, select it, come back in, and we see the data. So that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next video.